Joe Rogan has said a lot of shocking things on his podcast, but this time he's turned his attention to something most people didn't expect: tractors, specifically the giant green machines made by John Deere. What does Rogan, a comedian, MMA commentator, and podcast king, have to do with farming? Why would he go after a company that's been a part of American farms for almost 200 years? The answer might surprise you. For years, John Deere has been loved for its reliable tractors and farming equipment. But in recent years, the company has faced growing criticism, not for its machines, but for how it treats the people who use them. Farmers say John Deere won't let them fix their own equipment. Instead, they're forced to pay expensive fees and wait for authorized dealers to make repairs. And Joe Rogan has decided to speak out. On a recent episode of The Joe Rogan Experience, Rogan dropped some serious truth bombs about John Deere. His comments are causing a massive stir online, with farmers, consumers, and even lawmakers taking notice. But what exactly did Rogan say? And why is this fight such a big deal? It all started when Rogan brought up an issue that's been flying under the radar for years. Farmers across the country are furious because they're buying John Deere tractors, but they're not being given full control over them. Why? Because of software locks and restrictive repair rules. It's absolutely crazy, Rogan said during his podcast. Imagine spending $500,000 on a tractor, and you're told you can't even fix it when it breaks down. You don't really own it. You're just renting it, and John Deere gets to call the shots. Joe Rogan didn't hold back when talking about the struggles farmers face because of John Deere's restrictive repair policies. He painted a vivid picture of what it's like for a farmer during one of the most critical times of the year, planting or harvest season, when every minute counts. When you're a farmer, timing is everything, Rogan explained on his podcast. If your equipment breaks down during planting season or harvest, you don't just lose time, you lose money, crops, and sometimes your whole livelihood. But instead of letting farmers fix these issues themselves, John Deere forces them to wait for their own approved technicians to show up. And trust me, that wait can be brutal. Rogan described how many farmers live hours away from the nearest authorized John Deere service center. When a tractor or combine goes down, they're stuck waiting, sometimes for days, until a company-approved technician arrives. Meanwhile, crops sit in the field, vulnerable to bad weather or spoilage. But that's not the worst part. According to Rogan, the costs of these mandatory repairs can be staggering. Farmers have told me they've had to shell out thousands of dollars for what should have been simple fixes, he said. We're talking about problems they could have solved themselves if they just had access to the tools, parts, or software. But John Deere keeps all of that locked away behind legal barriers. It's outrageous. Rogan then brought up a significant development that's been making headlines: John Deere's recent agreement to address these repair issues. After years of mounting pressure from farmers, activists, and lawmakers, John Deere signed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the American Farm Bureau Federation, AFBF, in early 2023. The agreement was supposed to be a big win for farmers. In it, John Deere promised to make it easier for equipment owners and independent mechanics to access the tools, software, and manuals needed to repair their machines. On paper, this seemed like a step in the right direction, but Rogan wasn't convinced. Look, I've seen the headlines, Rogan said. John Deere is saying, we're going to let farmers fix their own equipment. But when you dig into the details, it's not that simple. A lot of this stuff still comes with strings attached. Farmers are telling me it feels like John Deere is just trying to save face, not actually fix the problem. One of the biggest criticisms of the agreement is that it's not legally binding. While the MOU outlines John Deere's commitment to right-to-repair principles, there's no law forcing the company to follow through. Rogan pointed out how this lack of accountability has left many farmers skeptical. Farmers are saying, how do we know John Deere will actually stick to this? They've been dealing with these repair restrictions for years, and trust me, they're not just going to take John Deere's word for it. Even with the MOU in place, many farmers are finding that the actual implementation of right-to-repair remains slow and uneven. For example, while John Deere has started rolling out software access in some areas, critics say the company still maintains tight control over diagnostic tools and replacement parts. Rogan highlighted these frustrations. Farmers are telling me that even with the new agreement, they're still hitting roadblocks, and he said, it's like John Deere is saying, sure, you can fix your own equipment, but only if you play by our rules. And those rules aren't exactly farmer-friendly. Some farmers have reported that accessing the software required to diagnose and fix certain issues comes with steep fees, while others say they've been told to sign restrictive agreements just to get basic repair tools. It's like they're giving farmers just enough to quiet the backlash, but not enough to actually solve the problem, Rogan said. Rogan didn't stop at criticizing the costs and delays caused by these repair policies. He also delved into the emotional and financial toll they take on farmers and their families. Think about it, Rogan said. You're out there, working your land, trying to provide for your family. Your tractor breaks down, and you know exactly how to fix it, but you can't because you don't have access to the software. So what do? You call John Deere, and then you wait. And while you're waiting, the clock is ticking. Your crops are sitting there, maybe even rotting. The stress is unreal. He shared stories of farmers who've lost entire harvests because of delays in getting their equipment repaired. These losses aren't just about money, they're about livelihoods. You're not just losing income, Rogan said. You're losing your future. A bad season can put a farmer into debt they'll never recover from. All because John Deere wants to keep their monopoly on repairs. It's heartbreaking, man. But for Rogan, this issue isn't just about tractors. It's about freedom. He compared it to something we all deal with, our phones. It's like what Apple does, Rogan said. They make it super hard for you to fix your iPhone because they want you to go through them for everything. It's the same thing with John Deere. They're controlling people through their machines. This idea that companies are limiting what people can do with the products they buy struck a nerve. Clips of Rogan's comments spread like wildfire on social media, with people praising him for taking on a topic that's usually ignored. Farmers especially are backing Rogan. One farmer commented online, "Finally, someone's talking about what we've been dealing with for years. Rogan's right. This is about more than just repairs. It's about control." To drive his point home, Rogan brought a farmer onto his podcast to share their firsthand experience. This guest told a jaw-dropping story that left Rogan and his listeners speechless. The farmer explained how during harvest season, a minor breakdown in one of their machines almost ruined their entire crop. The problem could have been fixed in a few hours if they had the right tools. Instead, they had to wait days for an authorized John Deere technician to show up. By the time the repair was made, part of the crop had already been lost. "You're sitting there watching your livelihood rot," the farmer said, "all because John Deere doesn't trust you to touch their machines." Rogan couldn't believe what he was hearing. "That's insane," he said. "That's people's lives, their families, their businesses. And John Deere's just sitting back, making money off their suffering." Now, Rogan's comments couldn't have come at a more critical time. Across the country, farmers and activists have been pushing for right-to-repair laws, rules that would force companies like John Deere to let customers fix their own products. Rogan made it clear he fully supports this movement. "This isn't just about tractors," he said. "It's about standing up to these massive corporations that think they can control everything. They want to keep us locked into their system, and we can't let that happen." Since the podcast aired, right-to-repair advocates have seen a surge in attention. Petitions are gaining signatures, lawmakers are being pressured to act, and farmers are sharing their stories online. You might be thinking, "I'm not a farmer. Why should I care?" Rogan has an answer for that too. "This could happen to anyone," he said. "Think about your car, your phone, your computer. These companies want to lock you out so they can keep making money off you long after you've bought the product. If they can do it to farmers, they can do it to you." Rogan's argument is simple. This fight isn't just about John Deere. It's about everyone's right to have control over what they own. Of course, John Deere isn't staying quiet. The company put out a statement defending its repair policies, claiming they're necessary to protect the safety and reliability of its equipment. But Rogan wasn't buying it. "That's just corporate speak," he said. "It's all about money. They don't want to lose their monopoly on repairs, so they're hiding behind these excuses." So will Joe Rogan's criticism make a difference? It's hard to say, but one thing's for sure. He's brought massive attention to an issue that's been flying under the radar. And when Rogan talks, people listen. Farmers, activists, and even politicians are now watching closely to see how John Deere responds. Will the company double down on its policies, or will it finally listen to the people who rely on its machines? As for Rogan, he's not backing down. "This is just the beginning," he said. "If they think they can keep getting away with this, they've got another thing coming." Joe Rogan's takedown of John Deere isn't just another viral moment. It's a wake-up call. Whether you're a farmer fighting for your livelihood or an average consumer tired of corporate overreach, this issue affects all of us. So what do you think? Should farmers have the right to fix their own equipment? Or is John Deere just protecting its business? Let us know in the comments. One thing's for sure, Joe Rogan isn't done talking about this, and neither should we.